In this video, we're going to be looking at comparing fractions. Okay, so previously we've learned, we've understood them, we know how to work with them, but now we need to be able to compare fractions. So which fractions are greater, smaller, or equal, etc. So in this lesson, we're going to be comparing them, and there's a few important things that you need to make sure you know. So we need to make sure that they have the same denominator. We need to understand what LCD is, or lowest common denominator. And we need to be able to use the greater than or less than symbols when comparing fractions. So first, let's get a little understanding here. So if I had these two fractions, it would be easy for me to compare and to decide which one is greater. 1/3 or 2/3, I know that 2/3 is bigger than 1/3 because they both have the same denominator and the numerator is bigger as well with the 2/3. So in this instance, 2/3 would be bigger than 1/3. But what happens if you get a question where the denominators are different? And that's where it gets really hard to compare. So I'm going to write two examples down here. So I'll write 3/5 or let's say 4/7. Okay, so now that they've got different denominators, it's actually quite difficult to work out or compare which one is better. So the way that we do that is that we need to make sure that we can convert these two fractions so they have the same denominator. And the way that we do that is by finding the lowest common denominator. Now we may have done in previous videos, we've looked at the lowest common multiple. So where we find multiples of numbers and we find the one that is the same between them, and that's our lowest common multiple. But we want to find the lowest common denominator. So we want to convert these two denominators so they're the same, so that we can then compare our fractions. Okay, so the way that we do that is obviously finding multiples or the same common denominator between these two. So let's start with 5. Okay, so if I have 5, I can start listing down the multiples of 5. Okay, go 30, 35. And I can do the same then for 7. Okay, I want to find the lowest common between them. So if I do 7 now, so 7, 14, 21, 28, 35. Okay, now I can see from here that I've got two of the lowest common between these two is 35. So I know that I can convert the denominators of these two to 35. That's going to make me able to compare the two fractions so I can work out which one's greater or less than based on the common denominator. So the way that we do that, and the rule is simply that whatever you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. Whatever you do to the denominator, you must also do to the numerator. So the multiples of 5 that I found out is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to multiply 5 by 7, and that means I must also multiply 3 by 7. Another way then you can move on to the other fraction. Now what I had to do for 7 is 1, I write it here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so if I multiply 7 by 5, I must also multiply 4 by 5. What that then will create is that will give me another set of fractions which I can easily compare. Okay, so 5 times 7 is obviously going to be 35. 7 times 5 is also going to be 35, so I have the same denominator. Let's start to compare now. So 3 times 7 is 21. 4 times 5 is 20. So now that they're the same denominator, I can actually compare, and I know that this one is greater than that one. So 21 over 35, or I just restate the question, 3 over 5 is greater than 4 over 7. Okay, so that's how you compare fractions. So it's important that you make sure that they each need to have the same denominator, and you do that by finding the lowest common denominator. You may have noticed that it's simply, another way you could do is simply just multiply the denominators together as well. So 5 times 7 or 7 times 5. But whatever you do to the denominator, you must also do to the numerator. And then that gives you your answer for showing either greater than, less than, or equal to. Thanks, guys.